You've done so many features on Mr. Spielberg. You must know by now what the secret to his success is. So, what is that?
Oh my God, that's a loaded question. I think the secret to his success is really, first of all, no one understands filmmaking the way he does, and I think his humanity also is very deep, and therefore, even with a movie like Jaws that's designed to be potentially a B movie about a monster, you see the humanity of Stephen throughout. The scene where the Chief Brody gets slapped on the piers, and following that is Brody and his kid at the dinner table. Those are intimate moments that really underlines for me that this director, when I first saw his name 50 years ago, I was like, I want to move to America. I'm French. I was living in France. So I think that the one thing that people don't necessarily realize, but it's there, is that Jaws is a people movie, and it's relatable and therefore, it feels extremely timeless to me. So I think that's the secret to an incredible storyteller. And growing up in France, I didn't like French movies because they were very enigmatic to me. You were dropped into a story and there was no beginning and no ending, right? And I always felt that was extremely selfish. And I really aspire to a full-grown story with a beginning, middle, and end, and a journey that was making me a participant. When he doesn't show the shark in Jaws at the beginning, yes, the shark wasn't working, but the effect that not showing it stimulates your imagination, and you're fully participating to the action. So there's a lot of incredible, benchmark and lessons to get from this, if you want to be a storyteller.
Well, when you were interviewing people for this, did you ever think at some point this could have gone south? This really could have been a bomb? Or was there just something about it that no, he just kept putting, everything into it and it had to be a success?
No, I mean, I just don't think you can ever predict if a movie at the end of the day is going to be a success or a bomb, or anything for that matter. But I think that Stephen says it himself, when he was offered the possibility of quitting, he didn't want to quit. And he didn't quit. And I think that's a story of survival and a story of perseverance and a story of conviction and having a vision. And he said to the head of the studio at the time, he said, look, I know there's a great movie there. It's a rite of passage. Jaws was a rite of passage, really. If you survive the making of Jaws, you're in, and a great metaphor for art in general. But also the interesting thing, is that the story of Jaws, of the three men trying to slay the monster, slay the beast, is very much what was happening in the production, except it didn't work. So it was just an equal sort of fight on both sides. And one of those rare instances where the where the experience of making it is very much the experience of the actual story.
Why was there not we always talk about this as the first big blockbuster, summer blockbuster. Why was there no blockbuster before this? Was that just the way the system worked? That there weren't films that were kind of aimed toward the summer audience?
I don't know necessarily, I'm not a historian of the blockbuster era, but there were. I think the thing that's very unique about Jaws is the sort of suddenly cultural phenomenon that it became that made it a blockbuster, and that was the score. Everybody was humming it. Stephen talks about being at Baskin Robbins and people singing Jaws. It was on Saturday Night Live. They were political cartoons to the point where Universal had to take out an ad with all the political cartoons and saying, it's also a movie, and merchandising. I mean, there was a book on the making of Jaws, which was not something that was necessarily done all the time. There was baseball caps and T-shirts and beach towels. People wanted to make a statement, and they wanted to own it as an experience and a shared experience at a time where the experience in the theater was a very unique thing. You would walk into a movie, you may have seen the trailer, you may have seen the poster or seen the lobby cards, but you didn't know anything, and there was something really magical to that. So when it was such a communal kind of experience where everybody was screaming at the same time and really laughing if there was a laugh or whatever, made this something that people wanted to share. And of course, this wave, so to speak, became something that George Lucas, 2 years later would ride on for Star Wars.
When you started thinking, who do I need to talk to? Were there people that you couldn't get? Were there ones
Well,
who didn't want to talk about it?
no, I mean, there's always the restriction of time. I had very little time to make the film. I wanted to do it right, and that meant a lot of editorial time. And so I was, kind of had blinders on, an incredible producing team, because I was filming in London, I was filming in Martha's Vineyard, and then I was filming in New York, and then I was filming in LA. I mean, I was all over the place, and it was really stressful. So unfortunately, some people were not always available, but I think that I was relying also on the original interviews I had done with some of the cast members who were either passed away or not available at the moment that I needed them. But also I was lucky that Jim Cameron happened to be in town. Jordan Peele was available. When I was in London, Steven Soderbergh was there. Guillermo del Toro was just back from doing Frankenstein. I mean, it was a supercharged kind of thing. But the people I really ultimately wanted was, aside from Steven himself, obviously, was that new generation of filmmakers, because Jaws is passed on, from generation to generation, and it's something that I wanted to highlight on this 50th anniversary, to say, well, all those filmmakers that we are awarded Oscars to today owe a debt of gratitude toward Jaws, and they're willing to talk about it. And all of them are saying it for a different reason. Guillermo is obsessed with the monsters, and Steven Soderbergh is obsessed with making movies really fast and economically. And here he is studying the call sheets and the schedule, going like, oh my God. And so it's really fun to talk to those people. And each of them brought in a new layer to my hopefully beautiful cake.
Well, what did Stephen think about sequels to the film? Was that something like, oh God, no, I don't want that, or?
Well, after the success of Jaws, Stephen really wanted to realize his dream project, which was Close Encounters of the Third Kind. So immediately on the heels of Jaws, he was into that, and you'd have to ask him, but the sequels were not really in his orbit, or because the path of his storytelling was guiding him towards something else.
Sure. Sure. Well, I'm so glad you did this, because I have always loved Jaws. Back when I was a younger journalist, I did a story about what people ate at movies. And Jaws was included in that, because if you go to a blockbuster, they'll eat everything. But if you go to a drama, they won't eat anything. And all those years, I've been trying to figure all this out. But thank you for filling in the gaps for me, because I sure appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Bruce. Have a great summer.
You too. Yeah, and just stay out of the water.
Yeah.